What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, we're going to be going through my top 36 running back rankings as we head into week 5 of the fantasy football season. We've already done the wide receiver version of this video, so if you have not checked that out, I strongly encourage you to check that out after today's video. But that said, let's not waste any more time. Let's hop right into today's video and let's start talking about these top 36 running backs. All right, so as you can see, I have the tier maker pulled up on the screen. I got 7 tiers to get through all 36 running backs in today's episode, and we're going to be kicking it off in tier 1. This is the elite running back ones here in week 5. Coming in as my number 1 overall player, I do have Jordan Mason, who plays against the Arizona Cardinals. Now, Mason, he did rattle off about 24 carries for 123 yards and a touchdown, while also adding 37 receiving yards on 2 receptions with 3 targets in Sunday's 30-13 win over the New England Patriots. Mason, he now has 3 top 7 finishes at the running back position and will continue to feast as long as CMC is out, especially in this week's matchup against a very easy Arizona run defense. Now, moving on to my number 2 overall running back this week, I do have Derrick Henry of the Baltimore Ravens. He gets to play on the road at the Cincinnati Bengals. Henry, he ran for 199 yards and a touchdown on 24 carries while securing all 3 of his targets for 10 yards and another touchdown in Sunday's 35-10 win over the Bills. Henry, he now has 3 straight running back 1 finishes in a row, and he has a good matchup this week against Cincinnati with a high projected game total. Coming in as my running back 3, here's where I'm going to have Alvin Kamara. He plays on the road at the Kansas City Chiefs, and Kamara, he carried the ball 19 times for 77 yards and a touchdown, and he caught 7 of his 9 targets for another 42 yards in the air in Sunday's 26-24 loss to the Falcons. Kamara, he was vultured twice by Taysom Hill in this one, but he still finished as a top 10 running back on the week. He is a must start every single week, even in a very tough matchup here this week against the Kansas City Chiefs. And now moving on to my number 4 running back on the week and the last player in this tier, I got Kyren Williams of the Los Angeles Rams. He plays against the Green Bay Packers, and Williams, he rushed 19 times for 94 yards and a touchdown, and he brought in all 4 targets for 10 yards in the Rams' 24-18 loss to the Bears on Sunday. Kyren has yet to have a week where he wasn't at least a running back 2 or better for fantasy football teams, and it looks like as long as Puka and Kupp are both out of this lineup, the Rams are going to keep leaning on Kyren Williams, and he should be a great start this week against the Green Bay Packers. Now moving on to my tier 2. My tier 2 is the high-end running back 1 tier. This is going to have number 5 overall Bijan Robinson. He plays against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Robinson, he carried the ball 7 times for 28 yards and caught all 4 of his targets for 46 yards in Sunday's 26-24 win over the Saints. Robinson, he saw a season low 61% of the offensive snaps in last week's matchup, and he did pop up on the injury report with a hamstring injury in practice on Monday, so this is going to be something to monitor throughout the week, but Bijan Robinson is still Bijan Robinson. The points are going to come eventually. He's still a top 5 play for me this week. Now moving on to my running back 6, here's where I'm going to have Josh Jacobs of the Green Bay Packers. He plays on the road at the Los Angeles Rams. Jacobs, he rushed 9 times for 51 yards and brought in 4 of 6 targets for 27 yards in the Packers' 31-29 loss to the Vikings on Sunday. Jacobs, he's going to start seeing some better finishes now that Jordan Love is under center, and now that the Packers get to play the Rams, who just let DeAndre Swift run wild, I have a good hunch that Jacobs is going to be one of the top performers this week at the position. Moving on to running back 7, here's where I'm going to put Kenneth Walker of the Seattle Seahawks. He gets to play against the New York Giants, and Walker, he rushed 12 times for 80 yards and 3 touchdowns while also adding 4 receptions for 36 yards in Monday's 42-29 loss to the Lions. It was an absolute explosion fantasy-wise for Walker managers, and he has finished as a top 10 running back in both of the 2 games that he's been healthy to play for. This is a solid matchup this week against the Giants, and I think it's another top 10 week for Kenneth Walker. Now moving on to running back 8, here's where I'm going to put James Cook of the Buffalo Bills. He plays on the road at the Houston Texans, and Cook, he rushed 9 times for 39 yards, and he caught his only target for 9 yards in Sunday's 35-10 loss to the Ravens. Cook, he kind of had his first bust week, if you want to call it that, of the season, but he's been very good for us in fantasy football. He's been very, very good for us in fantasy football, and he should have a chance to get back to it here this week against Houston. And now the final player in this tier for me, coming in as my running back 9, I do got Breece Hall of the New York Jets. They play against the Minnesota Vikings in London this week, and Breece Hall rushed 10 times for 4 yards while catching 2 of his 5 targets for 14 yards in Sunday's 10-9 loss to the Broncos. Hall's averaging just 3.1 yards per carry on his 56 attempts so far this year. Braylon Allen, he continues to eat into the workload, and Minnesota has a top 3 rushing defense against opposing running backs, so we might not get that elite Breece Hall here this week unless he finds his way into the end zone. Now moving on to tier 3. Tier 3, we're going to call this the low-end running back ones. Coming in as my running back 10, I got Joe Mixon of the Houston Texans. He gets to play against the Buffalo Bills, and Joe Mixon, he's missed the last 2 weeks with an ankle injury, but it sounds like he's pretty close to returning and will most likely be back here in this game. There couldn't be a better week for him to come back to, as Buffalo, it currently ranks dead last against fantasy football running backs, and they just gave up a monster day to Derrick. Henry. If Mixon plays this week, there's a very good chance that he finishes as one of the top running backs here in this slate this weekend. Now moving on to my running back 11, here's where I'm going to put James Conner of the Arizona Cardinals. He gets to play on the road at the San Francisco 49ers. And Conner, he rushed 18 times for 104 yards and a touchdown while catching his only target for 9 yards in Sunday's 42-14 loss to the Commanders. Just like Derrick Henry, Conner, he's finished as a top 10 running back in 3 of his 4 games this year. This week's matchup against San Francisco is projected to be one of the higher scoring games of the weekend, and Conner is as good of a bet as anybody to fall into the end zone on any given week. So James Conner, a top 12 play for me this week. And now moving on to my final running back in this tier, coming in as my running back 12, I got Aaron Jones of the Minnesota Vikings. As I mentioned, this game is going to be over there in London, but Jones, he rushed 22 times for 93 yards and he secured 4 of 5 targets for 46 yards in the Vikings 31-29 win over the Packers on Sunday. Jones, he hasn't scored a touchdown since week 1, but he's still been very productive for fantasy football teams, and he has seen 52 opportunities over the last 2 weeks. He's going to look to keep that up in London this weekend against a tough Jets defense that currently ranks 6th against fantasy football running backs. Now moving on to my tier 2. Tier 2, we're going to call that the safe, quote unquote safe running back 2s here in fantasy football. Coming in at running back 13, I got Brian Robinson Jr. He plays against the Cleveland Browns, and Robinson, he rushed 21 times for 101 yards and a touchdown while also catching 3 of his targets for 12 yards in Sunday's 42-14 win over the Cardinals. B-Rob keeps producing, and he should continue to keep getting opportunities moving forward, and he's really become a must-start player every single week, even if he does get a tough matchup this week against the Cleveland Browns defense. Now moving on to my running back 14, here's where I'm going to put Chuba Hubbard of the Carolina Panthers. He plays on the road at the Chicago Bears. Hubbard, he rushed 18 times for 104 yards and 1 touchdown in Sunday's 34-24 loss to the Bengals. He also added 4 receptions on 4 targets for 17 more yards in the air. Chuba has been the second biggest beneficiary of the quarterback switch to Andy Dalton, behind probably only Deontay Johnson in this offense, and he's finished as a top 5 running back in both weeks with Dalton under center. He should have another solid week loading here against a good Chicago Bears defense. Now coming in as my running back 15, here's where I'm going to put Achane of the Miami Dolphins. He plays at the New England Patriots this week, and Achane, he rushed 10 times for 15 yards and he brought in all 3 targets for 14 yards in the Dolphins' 31-12 loss to the Titans on Monday night. This whole Dolphins offense in general, it looks bad. It's really something we need to start second guessing on whether or not it is worth starting these Dolphins options until Tua Tagovailoa comes back. But Achane, being the running back, he should see some usage. He's still coming in for me as a top 15 play, but we're definitely going to be tempering those expectations with these Miami options moving forward. Now moving on to my running back 16, here's where I'm going to put Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He gets a good matchup this weekend against the Indianapolis Colts. Etienne, he carried the ball 11 times for 50 yards and he caught 1 of 2 targets for 10 yards in Sunday's 24-20 loss to the Texans. Etienne missed most of the first quarter with the shoulder issue, and he's failed to crack the top 20 running backs on the week in any game this year. This week, he does get Indy, who has been giving up some points to the running back position, but I think Etienne is more of a running back 2 than he is anything else with this current Jacksonville Jaguars offense. Now moving on to my running back 17, here's where I'm going to put Najee Harris of the Pittsburgh Steelers. They get a matchup against the Dallas Cowboys this weekend, and Najee, he carried the ball 13 times for 19 yards in Sunday's 27-24 loss to the Colts. He added 3 receptions on 6 targets for 54 yards as well. The pass catching, it's kind of what saved Najee's day for him, and it kind of kept this from being a total stinker. But this week's matchup against Dallas, it should be decent because we've seen them give up lots of points to the running back position this year outside of Devin Singletary last week. Now moving on to my running back 18, I am going to put DeAndre Swift of the Chicago Bears. He gets to play against the Carolina Panthers, and Swift, he rushed 16 times for 93 yards and a touchdown, and he brought in all 7 of his targets for 72 yards in the Bears' 24-18 win over the Rams on Sunday. Swift, he finally put up those numbers last week, and it was a good matchup for him on paper. This week's another good one as well, so hopefully he can build upon what he did last week, and Chicago can game plan around what has worked in week 4 compared to what had not worked the weeks before. So hopefully that means good things for DeAndre Swift here this week. And now the last and final player in this tier for me, it is going to be my running back 19, Ramondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots. He gets to play against the Miami Dolphins this week, and Stevenson, he rushed 13 times for 43 yards while catching 4 of 5 targets for 19 receiving yards in Sunday's 30-13 loss to the 49ers. Stevenson, he gets a matchup this week against a very bad Miami Dolphins team in general. So this is going to be one of those games where you don't really want to watch it, but that said, there should be some potential for Stevenson to bounce back and have some points for you and your fantasy football teams after a couple of down weeks. Now moving on to my tier 5. Tier 5 is going to be those fringe running back 2s, guys that are kind of on the cusp of that running back 2 type of production. I am going to have running back 20, Jerome Ford. He gets to play against the Washington Commanders, and Ford, he ran the ball 10 times for 58 yards, while also adding 7 receptions on as many targets for 27 yards in Sunday's 20-16 loss to the Las Vegas Raiders. Ford, he's going to get a nice matchup this weekend against the Commanders. They've been giving up a lot of fantasy football points to other teams despite winning games, and as long as Nick Chubb is out, I still think that Jerome Ford is a fine play for us at the running back position. Now, moving on to my running back 21, here's where I'm going to put Zach Moss of the Cincinnati Bengals. He gets to play against the Baltimore Ravens this week, and Moss, he rushed the ball 15 times for 51 yards in Sunday's 34-24 win over the Panthers. He added 4 catches on 4 targets for 27 yards and a touchdown as well. Moss, he was vultured by Chase Brown twice in this one, but he still somehow finished as the running back 17 on the week. And this week's matchup against Baltimore, it is going to be much tougher, so maybe temper the expectations for Moss, but he should still be a fringe running back 2 play. Now, moving on to my running back 22, I'm going to put Devin Singletary of the New York Giants. He plays on the road at the Seattle Seahawks, and Singletary, he rushed 14 times for 24 yards and brought in his only target for 14 yards in the Giants' 20-15 loss to the Cowboys on Thursday Night Football. Singletary is coming off of his worst performance of the year, and now he gets a very tough Seattle defense, but their defensive line has been banged up, so there may be some running room against Seattle here this week. Now, moving on to my running back 23, I'm actually going to put Trey Sermon of the Indianapolis Colts. He plays against the Jacksonville Jaguars on the road in Jacksonville, and Sermon, he rushed the ball 5 times for 8 yards in Sunday's 27-24 win over the Steelers. Now, he didn't earn his first touch until late into the third quarter, but he closed out the game for the Colts and led the backfield the rest of the way with Jonathan Taylor being forced to the sidelines with an ankle injury. Now, Sermon, he does look like he is in for a significant workload here in week 5. If Jonathan Taylor is not able to play, it looks like he's not going to be able to play, at least right now. So Trey Sermon, if you have him on waiver wires, if you have him on a team, I think he's a top 25 play at the running back position this week and a fringe running back too. Now, coming in as my running back 24, here's where I'm going to put Javonte Williams of the Denver Broncos. They play against the Las Vegas Raiders this week, and Williams, he ran for 77 yards on 16 carries against the Jets on Sunday. They added 2 receptions for 3 yards on 3 targets, and Javonte, he's coming off of his best rushing performance of the year, so that's at least positive for him. This week's matchup against Las Vegas is a good one for Williams, but he really isn't much of a running back that I'd like to play for the most part. He doesn't have much upside at all, at least with this current state of the Broncos offense. And now the last player in this tier for me in the fringe running back 2 category, I do have my running back 25. It is Kareem Hunt of the Kansas City Chiefs. They play against the New Orleans Saints, and Hunt, he rushed the ball 14 times for 69 yards in Sunday's 17-10 win over the Chargers. He added 2 receptions on 3 targets for 16 yards as well. And this is another one of those messy backfields, man. And it's tough to know how to treat this Kansas City backfield in general, but Hunt, he did look like he took over the majority of the carries in his first game with Kansas City, and I project him to get the majority of the carries again here in week 5. But again, this is a very tough Saints defense, and this is a very messy backfield that is still going to have Carson Steele and Samaje Perine involved, plus potentially Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the future. Now, moving on to my tier 6. Tier 6, we're going to call this the low upside RB3s. Coming in as my running back 26 on the week, I got Bucky Irving of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He gets to play on the road at the Atlanta Falcons, and Irving, he rushed 10 times for 49 yards and a touchdown, and he brought in 1 of 2 targets for 6 yards in the Buccaneers' 33-16 win over the Eagles on Sunday. It feels like this Tampa Bay run game is currently in flux, and now we have 2 weeks of top 24 performances from Irving, but this week's matchup against Atlanta, it's tough, and it could mean messy results for both White and Irving in this week's matchup. And I guess that takes us right to 27, because 27, I do have Rachaad White. He rushed the ball 10 times for 49 yards, and he brought in 2 of his 3 targets for 35 yards in the Buccaneers' 33-16 win over the Eagles on Sunday. Very similar stat lines for these 2 guys. The only difference is that Bucky Irving is the guy who got into the end zone. Similar to Irving, it feels like this backfield is one of the messiest in football, and it's tough to judge who to play and who has upside in this backfield. So the reality is they're both probably just low-end RB3s, maybe low upside RB3s here this week. Now, moving on to my running back 28, here's where I'm going to put Austin Eckler of the Washington Commanders. He plays against the Cleveland Browns, and Austin, he missed last week's matchup against the Arizona Cardinals with a concussion, but this offense is hot at the moment, and Austin does enough in the receiving game to make him a viable RB3 play this week, even if it's a tougher matchup on paper against the Browns. Now, coming in at my running back 29, here's where I'm going to put Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals. He plays against the Baltimore Ravens, and Brown, he rushed the ball 15 times for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns in Sunday's 34-24 win over the Panthers. He added 2 receptions on 3 targets for 12 yards, and Chase Brown saw the most opportunities he has seen all year long in last week's game, and he finishes the running back 6 overall on the week. That said, it definitely feels like an outlier performance for me, at least as of right now, so let's temper the expectations with Chase Brown until we see some more data to back up the performance that he had there last week. Now, coming in at my running back 30, this is where I'm going to put Roschon Johnson of the Chicago Bears. They play against the Carolina Panthers, and Johnson, he rushed 7 times for 26 yards and a touchdown touchdown in the Bears' 24-18 win over the Rams on Sunday. After the Bears told us that Roschon Johnson was on tap for more work, he really didn't get much at all. He still looks like a change of pace running back behind Swift, but he may see some goal line work here in this game against the Carolina Panthers. And now the last player in this tier for me, coming in at 31, it is going to be Raheem Mostert of the Miami Dolphins. They play against the New England Patriots on the road. Mostert's another player that's been missing some games due to injury, but it sounded like he was at least pushing to play in last week's matchup against the Titans. So if he's active in this week's lineup, he may be somebody worth looking at. Even though this offense is very bad, they are going to have to lean on the run, and Raheem Mostert will at least get some touches. And now moving on to my final tier, tier 7. These are flex plays at best, but I will say if you watch the wide receiver episode, I would play every single wide receiver in that episode, plus maybe even more over some of these guys. Coming in for me at 32, I do have Braylon Allen of the New York Jets. They play against the Minnesota Vikings on the road. They're in London. Allen, he rushed 8 times for 34 yards, and he caught his only target for 12 yards in Sunday's 10-9 loss to the Broncos. The Jets offense as a whole, it's looked pretty bad in last week's game, but Allen, he's still getting some work, and he's probably going to continue to have some flex appeal in leagues where you may need a plug-and-play fill-in type of running back during those bye weeks and when you are filling in for those injuries. Now, coming in as running back 33, I do have Alexander Mattison of the Las Vegas Raiders. They play against the Denver Broncos on the road, and Mattison, he only handled 5 carries during the Las Vegas 20-16 win over the Browns in Week 4, but he had compiled 60 yards on the ground, and Raiders head coach Antonio Pierce said on Monday that Madison's recent performances have earned him some more playing time and some more opportunities moving forward. This matchup is tough, but it looks like Madison is trending up currently in the fantasy football space. Now moving on to my running back 34 on the week, I got Rico Dowdle of the Dallas Cowboys. He gets to play on the road at the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Dowdle, he rushed 11 times for 46 yards, and he brought in his only target for a 15-yard touchdown in the Cowboys' 20-15 win over the Giants on Thursday night. Rico Dowdle is starting to look like the best running back in his backfield, but his snap percentages really aren't that good. He's still seeing less than 50% of the snaps, and they really haven't changed since week 1, and he has a horrible matchup this week against the number 1 ranked Steelers defense. Now coming in at running back 35, I am going to put Justice Hill of the Baltimore Ravens. He plays on the road at the Cincinnati Bengals. Hill, he rushed 4 times for 18 yards, and he caught all 6 of his targets for 78 yards and a receiving touchdown in Sunday's 35-10 win over the Bills. Justice Hill actually finished as a top 12 running back on the week in week 4 due to the receiving volume and the touchdown, but he feels like a player who's still only a complimentary piece to Derrick Henry, and he really doesn't have much upside overall. And now last but certainly not least, coming in at 36, I do have Zach Charbonnet of the Seattle Seahawks. He gets to play against the New York Giants, and Charbonnet, he rushed the football twice for 15 yards while bringing in all 5 of his targets for 39 yards in Monday's primetime loss to the Lions. It does look like with a healthy Kenneth Walker on the field, Zach Charbonnet, he's been pushed back into that secondary backup type of running back role, and it does limit his fantasy upside moving forward as long as Kenneth Walker is on the football field. So there you have it, folks. That is my top 36 running backs as we head into week 5 of the NFL season. As always, if you did enjoy the video, you found it actionable, something you could take away from it, make sure you hit the like button. It is the best free way to show this channel some support. And also make sure you are subscribed to this channel. That way you see our starts of the week, sits of the week videos that come out here later this week, and all of the other content that comes out on this channel. And last, but certainly not least as well, make sure you go join that Discord. That Discord is free to join, linked in the description. I'm in there helping you with start sits, waivers, trades, anything you need fantasy football related. I got you. It's the best way to get my advice. And make sure you go join that. As I mentioned, free to join, so there is no risk in doing that. But with all of that out of the way, I have nothing else for you today. So I will see you on our next episode. But until then, peace out.